Hi, welcome to No Time Like Joe Time. If you're like me, most of your life you've been watching TV shows, learning lessons from the TV that your parents should have taught you, but they don't because they kind of don't like you and they usually just send you out. You know, the normal childhood experience. And also, if you're like me, you don't tend to have a lot of original thought. Most of your language comes from quotes. Well, that's me, but on top of that, I actually found a lot of philosophy in the shows I watch. And I thought to myself, wouldn't that be fun if I made a podcast where we talk about this stuff? And I did, and it sucked. So now I'm doing it again, but I'm going to have a new host with me every time. Today, for our first episode, I'm so happy to have my friend, my cousin, Jacob Shornack. We'll be talking about all kinds of shows like The Simpsons, Scrubs, The Simpsons, Futurama, Simpsons, Rick and Morty, Simpsons. You get the idea. So with that, we'll get started. Enjoy the episode. Hey man, thanks for being my first guest for this. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Of course, man. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
Hey, listen, I gotta be honest with you. I looked over the outline that you sent,
Yeah.
and I gotta be honest, some work.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't want to say it's bad, but
okay.
it's bad.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you being honest, I guess.
Yeah.
What do you have any input or?
Oh, I have a ton of notes. Listen,
Okay.
all right. So first of all, I think you need to change the name of it to
Okay.
Suck It Joe, the Jacob Hour. Honestly, let's just not make it about you. Let's make it about me. And
Okay.
I think we just need to have the entire podcast being me talking and maybe you just sitting there quietly looking kind of handsome. And maybe, honestly, you probably don't even have to be sitting there. How about like you could go grab me a donut? I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay. Thanks for sharing. Just if I can give a couple notes.
No,
For,
remember, this is the Jacob show.
yeah, okay. Well, we can edit this part out if you really don't like it, but like it is technically, hypothetically, my podcast. So I kind of do feel like maybe I should talk a little bit. And for the donut, dude, I'm in Minnesota. You live in Chicago. So for some reason, the audio cuts out here. So I'll walk you through what happens. So after saying to Jacob he lives in Chicago, Jacob says, well, you better start driving. And I'm like, no way, that's crazy. Chicago's a far drive. And he's like, well, that's the only thing that will matter. And I'm like, no way. So that's pretty funny, huh? It's pretty good. You're probably laughing while you listen to this. You're probably like, wow, that was some real creativity there. So I'll give you a little bit of time to finish laughing, and then we'll continue the podcast. So yeah, I hope that was a good laugh for you. Okay, well that was fun and stupid.
I love that.
When I was younger, I don't know if you were like this, Jacob. Whenever I'd see a bit like that on TV, I never knew it was real. Like there was Jay Leno had this time where they collaborated with like the WWE or I don't know what, but Hulk Hogan like came on and like I thought it was real. Like Hulk Hogan actually came and fought with Jay Leno. Kevin Burbank had a fight. I was like, I can't believe Hulk Hogan did that. I once respected him. And, and then I realized it was fake.
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about like your entire world comes shattering down of like I thought I knew how this was, and you're like, oh my gosh, like all television, one way or another, is scripted. Is I had friends that just did House Hunters,
Yeah.
um, and I'd always thought with House Hunters, it is the real estate agent finds three random houses and they are like, "Oh, wow, these are great." And then they pick the one that they actually like. No. Learn that they've already purchased their house. They then have to go to look at two random houses that they're not even interested in no way. Like again, already bought their house, help them move into their house type of thing. And yeah, they literally have to go around and be like, wow, I really like this of this house and this of this house, but I guess I don't like the brick of this other house. And I'm like, hold on, you're
They,
telling me that like this is not real? It shattered my mind, broke everything like of what I thought I knew about the world.
yeah, I've heard that one. And I have to think that those people are really good actors because if it was me and I was at the home I liked, I'd be like, I really like this one.
Yeah.
Wink. And then at the others, I'd be like, I'm torn if I'd be like, oh, yeah, this one. Or if I'd be like, God, that could have been my bathroom.
I know, right?
Which way do I go?
I know. Well, yeah, and they were saying they had to like spend minutes just staring at each other, of like just nodding, because then they're gonna edit that together and be like,
Mm,
good point, good point. I just, it makes so much sense, but it also is just one of the funniest fucking things I've ever heard.
yeah. One thing that got me, I tell this story and people laugh at it all the time. People will talk about like when they first realized Santa Claus wasn't real. I never I never grew up. I think my parents told me really quick, like, no, that's not real. But what I do remember is when I first found out wrestling was fake. I was watching wrestling, and my
Was this
dad.
with Grandpa?
Nope,
Okay,
nope.
okay,
I was watching wrestling, and my dad came in. He's like, "We're gonna watch boxing," and I
right.
go, "But wrestling's on." And he goes, "It's fake." That was the last time I ever watched wrestling. And like for a while, I'd tell that story traumatized, and people would always laugh at it. And I'm like, it's not funny. And I saw this episode of The Simpsons, and I was like, you know what? This was like me. Okay, so quick pause. Uh, what has been your exposure to The Simpsons? Like, when did you start watching? What's the what was it like for you to watch? I know when it first came on, it was very controversial. So I'm just curious, like, what that experience was for you.
Yeah, so my parents didn't let us watch The Simpsons as kids.
Mhm.
For I think for the same reason that a lot of parents were like, no, this is inappropriate for children. So I really didn't get into it until like high school time, like late middle school, high school. And I have not seen all the episodes in any way. I mean, there's what,
Mhm.
33, 34 seasons. There's no way to watch like
34, 760 episodes so
yeah,
far,
honest,
still
like,
going.
listen, I can binge a lot of stuff. 34, 700 plus episodes. I'm like, listen, I'm gonna go lay down, and that's like trying to watch, every single episode of Law and Order. There's over like 400 episodes. I'm like, I don't need to do that. So I've not seen every episode. I've not seen, I'm not deeply versed within it, but I have the times that I have watched it and the things that I have consumed of it is a show that is smart, it's funny, it's uh I'm confident. In fact, I would put money down that the writers and creators are time travelers because the number of things that they predicted is terrifying, but also amazing. So I'm like Back to the Future in it of like, okay,
Yeah.
what do I need to? I'm gonna watch this. That's really what I have to do. Just watch The Simpsons. Figure out like where am I gonna put my next bet on
Mm-hmm.
Cubs to win the World Series in
Yeah.
2043. Yeah. How about yourself? I know you mentioned that when before we started recording that you'd kind of been more versed in it. So
Yeah.
what was your
I,
experience?
I, my parents started letting me watch it at day one. I was like 5, and they're like, "Check this out." So
Well done, Dan and Janet.
yeah,
Well done. Well done.
I don't ever remember a time not watching The Simpsons. And it's also funny about comparison because now it's like one of the more tamer shows
Right.
on TV. Like,
Right.
so just
Well, I laugh. So Morgan and we watch it's part of the same family, Animation Nation. We watch Bob's Burgers every night before we go to
it's
bed,
great.
as we're going to bed. And I noticed for the first time, or maybe like just realized, but noticed for the first time that there's that disclaimer at the beginning of viewer discretion advised. This may not be appropriate for all ages. And I was like, are you Bob's Burgers? Like
Yeah.
this is a wholesome show of a
Mhm.
family who loves each other. But I think it's that same thing as, people see that little disclaimer of viewer discretion advice. Oh, this isn't going to be appropriate for kids, but it's like, but what's really bad about it? Like what's actually the thing that is like terrible and going to ruin children and all this. It's like I guess that there's drinking and a little bit of cussing and
Yeah.
diverse-ish group of
Mhm.
characters. Like, I don't know. Oh, but I love that. I love that,
Yeah.
like that story of you and your dad having
Yeah.
those warm, fuzzy feelings watching it
Yeah.
and like really bonding. That's
Yeah. And
fuck yeah.
I've actually started letting my oldest son, who's 8, watch The Simpsons with me. And I learned this from a podcast I listened to. There's a podcast called Talking Simpsons. If you're a Simpsons fan, it's a must listen. They go through every episode of The Simpsons and they talk about behind the scenes. They like references. It's amazing. I love it. So good. But one of the guys, he's kind of in my boat where he's watched it his whole life. But his parents like would teach him things to it, be like, yeah, Bart did that, but obviously here's why it's not okay. And
That's
so like he actually learned a lot from it to be like, oh, this is why it's not okay. So I do that with
yeah,
Jack. I'm like, yeah, this is funny on TV, but here's why you actually don't do it. And it's been
right.
really good. So we're gonna play a quick clip of The Simpsons and we'll go from there.
Hell yeah.
Sideshow Bob has no decency. He called me Chief Pig'em. Now I get it. Good.
I can't tell you how many times I've watched that, and it gets me every time. Just he's so mad about it. And it's a courthouse and
Right.
everybody just
Well,
laughs.
and he's a menace to society. He called me Chief Pig'em. It's of all the things that Sideshow Bob has done in
Yeah.
his life, that is definitely the worst. Definitely the
I
worst.
didn't even think about that. Like that's what he brings up.
Right.
Not the multiple times he's tried to kill people. But he called me
Kidnap
pig.
Bart? No. It's listen, he got my name wrong. He called me a pig.
Oh God. I never thought of that. Oh my. Now I hope it's okay to bring this up. I think
Yeah.
you are somebody who you haven't taken yourself too seriously because you used to do stand up.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I did stand up for about 2 years and yeah, had a great time doing it.
yeah, have you found truth in that of like not taking yourself too seriously?
Yes and no. Um, I've found that it's good to laugh at yourself. 100%. It is so important to be able to like have those moments where you're like, listen, I'm a goofy person, and I'm like, oh man, that thing that I did that was kind of embarrassing, but like I can laugh it off. But I think there's also like this really important truth of being like, you know, sometimes it's okay to be like, listen, this is not a laughing time, and like everyone else could be laughing, be like, I don't think that's funny.
Yeah.
Like I love that episode. I love that scene, kind of for two reasons. it's funny because he's, kind of, as I said before, with, that's the worst thing that Sideshow
Yeah.
Bob has ever done.
Mhm.
Police officer who completely misses the mark of kind of this terror to society. But also it's like he didn't get the joke. He wasn't a
Yeah.
part of it and for me, it kind of looks like he's like, oh, yeah, that was funny. Like, he's behind the curve a little.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I now you said sometimes like, hey, I don't think that's funny. Do you find that more like if you see somebody else being the butt of the joke, or is there times that it's you as well where you're like, no, I don't want to laugh at this. This isn't funny to me.
yeah, I a lot of the times it's when it's like pointed at me, when I'm the butt of the joke,
Yeah.
is the times when I'm like, man, that's hard to swallow.
Yeah.
Um, but it's yeah, but it's also like I think there's a difference between someone finding something funny because they are like they're a part of it versus we're making fun of you, we're ridiculing you because you're here,
Yeah.
because like yeah, just missing the mark, I guess.
Yeah. What I kind of, when I saw that, one thing I always think about, and this was kind of like a motto for me growing up, that if I don't laugh at it first, if I don't laugh, they will. And
Mm,
I've learned to get ahead of it almost. And I use a lot of self-deprecating humor to kind
yeah,
of help. And the reasons I do that, one, it's kind of easy humor. But two, I know what I'm sensitive about,
yeah,
what I'm not. Like I'm not the most in shape guy. And there's days I'm like really sensitive about that. I'm like, I'm not going to joke about it. But then
yeah.
there are other times I'm like, yep, I got to do better. And I was at my last job and I was talking with a lady and she's like, yeah, I got this huge Christmas tree in the back of my van, but I think I'm going to leave it in there because it's good to have back weight in, your car. And I go, yeah, whenever my wife wants, a lot of weight in the back, she's just like, Joe, get back there. And like at that time I found it funny. And a lot of times, like if I know I did something, another one, I think this actually illustrates it a little better. So I was at my desk and the building I was at, people could come in from different buildings and work there. Well, there was this lady who was in the cubicle next to me and I had to do a meeting. So I picked up my stuff and I dropped my mouse, dropped my laptop, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. So I bring it all, go back in, come back, start putting stuff down, drop my notebook, drop my mouse again, drop my keyboard. Like I don't do that normally. And I'm like, okay, she sees this. We know both see this happening. So I look over at her and I go, I, I'm not normally that clumsy. And she goes, are you sure? And I laughed so hard, but I think it was because I initiated that and I
Yeah,
made it okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think like that's a big part of it is like, one, like you being like, hey, I'm gonna laugh at this first and like joke of myself first. I think and even people who are, making the joke,
Mhm.
like, in your like, a great example of like, people making joke on like my behalf, um, towards me or whatever, on the butt of the joke where I'm like, I'm okay with this,
Mhm.
are people that I know and trust, who I
Mm.
know don't mean it in like anything ill about it.
Right.
And obviously most people who know you aren't trying to make you the butt of the joke
Yeah.
for like just for fun for no reason. Sometimes you just realize that there's like, well, that's what you're supposed, like that's your role.
Yeah.
That's who you are. But an example of a time where I'm like, yeah, I'm totally fine with it, and I think it's funny, and I'm in on it too. And that's the big thing. I'm in on it too. Is when someone's like, when in our D&D group, when someone's like, suck it, Jacob,
Mhm.
which again, suck it, Joe, that's the new name of the podcast. I'm telling you, it's a good one. But like at that point, I know at no point is that something that's like point at me negatively. Like they're not like,
Yeah.
oh, we hate Jacob, suck it. It's like, haha, that good thing happened.
Yeah.
Suck it, Jacob.
You know, this kind of reminds me a little bit of Mr. Rogers went on Johnny Carson. And right before he went on, he met Eddie Murphy. And Eddie Murphy was doing this. This is when he was on SNL, and he was doing like Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood, which the bit was like he was in the ghetto.
Yep.
And like there's a picture of Mr. Rogers with Eddie Murphy, and they asked Mr. Rogers, what do you think about it? He's like, oh, I think it's funny. I think it's, done out of, love and kindness. But what he talked about, what he didn't like it when people were impersonating him on the radio because the kids couldn't tell that it wasn't him. So he was very frustrated with that. So we are going to go on to the next clip where we're going to learn about when you take something so far and maybe you don't realize you took it so far. So here's the clip.
Hey, Mo, you got change for a 5?
Yeah, sure thing, Lenny. A snake in a cash register. Great prank, fellas. Great. Oh, I'm going to be sick tonight.
Hey, Ma, you want to smell my flower?
Do I? Oh, I'm burning up here. Taking advantage of my alcohol-soaked clothes. Oh, it's funny, and it makes you think. Oh, I need some coffee before I black out. Homer, pass me the sugar.
This is gonna be great.
Oh,
Jeez!
Oh, there's sugar all over the bar now.
that's not funny, Homer.
Yeah, we were just messing around, and you had to go too far!
How many people want Homer banned from this place for life?
Yeah! Come on, everybody. This bar is like a tavern to me.
Yeah, sorry, Homer. You should have thought of that before you gave me the old sugar me due. I'm taking your caricature down from Mount Lushmore. And I'm pulling your favorite song out of the jukebox.
It's raining, man!
Yeah, not no more, it ain't.
Ow. Ooh.
I love that Homer's favorite song is "It's Raining Men." It's great choice. Great choice.
That wasn't planned, that Mr. Rogers reference, but it actually kind of works well as I think about it because, you might think like this whole parody of being in this ghetto neighborhood would be like this huge offense or like Cobra in the cash register.
Yeah.
But it's something like I would not have guessed either. Like it's the radio that he really had a problem with because he's like, the kids don't know it's not me and I don't like that. And I think that was kind of my lesson of why I also like self-deprecating humor, kind of like I said, because I know where the line is and I don't always know where the line is with somebody else.
100%. 100%. I'm the same way. Like I can make fun of myself all day, every day. Let's go. Like, but I know where I'm at. I know, like, as you said, like, body image stuff. There are times when I'm like, that is off limits for me. Like, I'm not even going to talk about that because I feel very insecure. And so like, I don't want to go there. Or if I do go there, it's one of those like, oh man, like we're really getting down on ourselves and it's less funny. It's more just deprecating. But for other people, it's just like, we don't know where they are all the time.
Yeah. Have you ever been a part of like either a group or a situation where people have like teased somebody and you can clearly tell like it's not going well? While you think about that, I got a story that I think fits this really well. So this is years ago. My brother and his wife, they've been married for like, I don't know, 15, 16 years, long time.
I mean, 2006.
Yeah. Okay.
So 17 years now.
Yeah. And this was before they had kids. I'm
Right.
glad you know more about my brother than I do.
I mean, well, I was at the wedding too. So like,
So yeah, it was before they had kids. Me and my dad were at my brother's house and my dad and I were going to go get McDonald's. And my brother was like, well, I can't because, Kelsey's making soup for us. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to give it to my brother. I'm like, oh, nice. You're going to have soup, Jer. Enjoy your soup while we get McDonald's. And I'm like, oh, I got him good. Well, then like the next week, so went to the VFW and my sister-in-law was there and she's like, hey, I got a bone to pick with you. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, you really hurt my feelings when you were over and you were making fun of my soup. And like, it didn't even register with me that she could take it that way. And I was like, whoa, yeah, I get why you feel that way. I'm so sorry. And that was just such a valuable lesson that like, I saw it as innocent fun. I didn't mean it by anything, but it really hurt her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I'm racking my brain trying, like, I know it's the fact that I've been a part of those instances. And of course, at this moment, when I'm wanting to pull one, it's not coming. But I absolutely know that there have been times when I've been a part, like, I've been the one making the joke. And someone later comes up to me, he's like, hey, that made me feel really uncomfortable, or that made me not feel valued.
Yeah.
And that hurt.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, like, that is not how I intended it. That,
Yeah.
like, but I love, I can't remember who said it, but intention means nothing. Like, what you intended means nothing.
Yeah.
What matters is how that person felt.
Yeah.
Like, that's honestly, I would argue that that's more important.
Yeah. There's a saying, we judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge others by their actions.
Yeah. Yep.
And I
Yep.
think that's, and that's actually kind of where I was going to lead next to, because I feel like things have gotten better with this, but I think, well, my kids are notorious for this. So they'll be like playing games and one of them will be like, God, you suck. I hate you. And I'm like, hey. And they're like, I was saying it to the remote control. And I'm like, no, you weren't. You were saying it to your brother. But like,
Don't let them ever play Mario Party. They
oh, they have.
Oh,
but they don't anymore.
Yeah, I was about to say, are either of them still alive? Because that's how friendships are ended.
Well, they united against me, who whooped their butts.
Oh,
You got to give them a common enemy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then remind them that you can beat them in any old system because you grew up on that.
I'm just that good. I there's times, I mean, you see it a lot with bullying where people are like just mercilessly picking on this kid. And they're like, hey, we were just joking.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. And I think there's still a little bit of that where, because I think this is funny, you should think it's funny.
Right.
And if you don't think it's funny, that's your problem.
Right. This was my intention. My intention was for it to be funny.
Yeah.
Why aren't you getting the joke? Because it wasn't funny.
Yeah. And sometimes it's, you don't know what's behind it. I mean, again, I think that clip's perfect. Just, you wouldn't think the sugar cap would be the one that Mo gets upset with.
Yeah.
But
it reminds me, I just recently, so Morgan and I just got Apple TV.
Oh, nice.
Because we got new phones and we're like, we're gonna get the free subscription. And so I finally finished Ted Lasso. And
nice.
Which, if you haven't watched it, go watch it.
Yes,
it is a fantastic show that is like so positive, like for mental health, for like positive masculinity, positive femininity, like everything. Yeah. It's just such a pure show. But Roy, one of the gruff players and later coach, talks about how, like, he like one of his first years on the team is making fun of a guy. The guy's going to have a kid and make some joke of like, oh, like, how do you know that you're the dad? Like, maybe I could be the dad. And the player just beats the living shit out of him. And he's like, I had broken ribs and, a black eye and like a cracked skull, all this stuff. And the guy was kicked off the team, and come later to learn that he and his wife had lost the baby. And he hadn't told anyone that this had happened. And the moment that this was said, the guy just lost it. which is one of those, you don't know what's happened behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And not everyone's going to share with you what's going on. And that's like, and it's not their responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
Like, that's not on them. It's
Yeah.
sometimes just like recognizing that they do tell you, taking it seriously and saying like, man, I fucked up. I hurt you and I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good example. And I think, and it was funny because like the church I grew up with, people were like, you watch that? Why would you watch that? And, you know, you kind of tapped on this of like, you don't know what's going behind the scenes. Part of the reason I love The Simpsons as much as I could, growing up, my dad worked in construction. So there were weeks he worked 80 hours in a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you work that much, you're going to be a little cranky. And so because he did that most of his life, you know, I kind of saw my dad as this kind of scary figure. But when we watched The Simpsons together, there was this bond.
Oh, I love that.
We were in it together. And so when I watch The Simpsons, I have this warm and fuzzy feeling about my dad.
Oh, I love that so much.
And when I started to tell people that, they were like, oh, I mean, I feel like I don't know if you're like this, but I'm a rare exception where I'm like, hi, nice to meet you. Would you like to hear about my depression? And, but most people, yeah, they're not gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult topics. And I think if we knew behind the scenes, we'd be a lot more careful. You know, again, I love humor. I love comedy.
Absolutely.
It's how I get by. But, you know, and I think you're right, too, that the people who I love the most, I feel a little bit more comfortable teasing a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't think I tend to like really rip into people a lot. Like I'll do a little zinger here or there, but you know, but yeah, somebody who like a coworker or somebody, I can't think of the last time I like ragged on a.
Yeah. I mean, and I also love comedy and humor and laughing. But also there are times when it's like, listen, I'm not part of the joke, as with Chief Piggum, or the joke being wrong, with Homer spilling which obviously like that's the joke within The Simpsons is spilling the sugar, is first of all, don't ever mess with the man's coffee. Like that's really where he went wrong.
Yeah.
But it's also like, the joke is clearly this is so lesser compared to being, assaulted by a cobra or having your shirt lit on fire. But it's also like, okay, that didn't follow the code more or less of what the jokes were. And so having like being one who loves comedy, there are also times when it's like, listen, again, like I don't want this. I don't want this laugh, or I don't want to be the butt of the joke. Like within a lot of my circles, I am the butt of the joke. And 9 times, like, within the D&D group, I love it. I love it because I know that it is a loving and welcoming group. There are other areas where I'm like, listen, like at some point you got to see me more as just the butt. Like I'm a diverse, interesting individual that has a complexity galore. And so, yeah, I just think it's like always keeping that in mind is like, what's the intention behind the joke? What's the intention behind anything that we're doing?
Yeah.
And how can this be perceived? How is this being received by another person? And part of that is on them, again, going back to the Ted Lasso example is like, we don't always know what's going on, but sometimes you just gotta like, it is a little bit on, if something really upsets you, you gotta tell someone. But at the same time, like, I don't know, don't take yourself so seriously, but also like take yourself seriously.
Yeah, I know it's finding that balance because it's like, because one thing, if we just showed that first clip with Chief Piggum, I definitely
I love that's what we're calling him. I love
Chief
we're
Piggum.
like, we're like,
Piggum
that's
now.
his name.
And like, I'd bring up like, what I'm not advocating for is laughing at everything.
Yeah.
I'm not.
No, definitely not.
Yeah, I'm not saying like, if you recently got divorced and people are like, about time, Like, if that's something you're sensitive about, you don't need to laugh at that. Or, or like if somebody's clearly being mistreated, like, no, that's not something to laugh at.
Right.
And, then on the other side, if, if I dropped a controller or something and I was like, ugh, like I could have got really upset when that girl was like, "Are you sure?" When I dropped my stuff, but I know I opened the door for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And kind of being aware of that. Have you find any good strategies, like if humor is going on that's not landing, how to either deflect it or to kind of say, hey, not working for me, guys?
New Jacob or old Jacob? And I say that as like someone who's been to a ton of therapy, who's like, listen, how do we like use our voice and know that we have a voice? So I'm the type of individual, kind of give you two sides of it, for myself when I use humor and when others use humor. Is I, in very stressful situations, I divert to humor. When I'm like, I am uncomfortable, I'm going to go to humor.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Morgan not too long ago. She goes, when you do that, because I did it in a conversation with a friend, and I got done, and Morgan was like, that really is off-putting. It's like, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, you're basically like, it feels very defensive when you just immediately jump. Like, it makes the other person feel very defensive when you just jump to humor when you're in like this genuine, deep conversation. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm just, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm assuming they feel uncomfortable. So I just want to cut the tension and laugh about it and be like, yeah, we're like, let's not take ourselves too seriously. But sometimes like people don't want to laugh. Sometimes they're like, hey, I want to sit in this discomfort. I want to be with these uncomfortable emotions. They're important.
Yeah.
And so having that ability to like have someone who loves you be like, hey, that wasn't like, this is what you're making people feel, is a great eye opener to be like, oh man. But for like when other people, like for my self-diffusing, the thing I used to always do is join in on the laughing and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to join in on the joke, even if I'm like, I do not like this. But like, well, kind of as you said earlier, if I'm laughing, like I can laugh first and then I win more or less. Like it's not as cutting. But I've just found that, recently it's like, if I'm like, hey, I don't like this, I'll be like, hey, that, can we cut out with that joke? And if people are receptive and if they respect and love you, they don't have to love you. They respect you, or in any way that they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that this was, impacting you in that way. And I think it's just really like using your voice and expressing that this is how this is making me feel, because again, people don't know what's going on behind closed doors. People can't read your mind. So gotta just, use that voice.
Definitely. One strategy sometimes I'll do is, if something comes up and they're like, ha ha ha, like you're, I don't know, we'll go back to weight. Ha ha, you're weight, you fatty. And quick pause. I have to say, if you want to have fun with something, play some Pokemon games and
Oh my
name your
God.
character Fatty. Because there
Yes.
was one where I beat somebody and they go, and I named my character Fatty, and they go, well, I'm not going to take this personal, Fatty. It was so perfect. But
oh my God, yes. That is amazing.
But if I was, on one of my sensitive days and somebody was like, haha, got a Shamu over here or something, I think I'd give like a ha, yeah. And I'd be like, yeah, no, this has been tricky for me lately.
Yeah.
I've been having a tough time with it, where it's like I feel like I'm both communicating and not putting myself in a spot where like I'm confronting. And most of the time, if they're like, I feel like 9 out of 10 times they're like, got it. But occasionally, then you have to just be like, hey, actually, this isn't funny anymore. And it's tough because I feel like usually if that happens, those are the people who are like, you can't take a joke.
Right.
Why can't you take a
Right.
joke?
And you're like, oh, cool. I don't need you in my life anymore.
Yeah.
Like, like you're clearly not the type of person that I want to be around because you're not like, you don't respect me at
Yeah.
that point. If you're like, you can't take a joke, it's like, listen, if I thought it was funny, I would be right there with you.
Yeah.
But this is not, or, I just like, even going to, it's that intention, with the scene, with the Simpsons scene that we just watched is like, if someone calls you Shamu, okay, what's the intention behind that? The
Yeah.
intention is to hurt you.
Yeah.
Like that's really what it is. It's
Mhm.
like, they're laughing about it. Others might be joining in, be like, I get that reference. That's a good one.
Yeah.
But like the true intention there is to be hurtful. And that's like, some people find that humor hilarious. I know there's some comedians who absolutely love, to like really point out and degrade women or different ethnic groups, or even men. And I'm like, listen, some people find that hilarious. I don't. Like, like everyone's going through some really hard stuff.
Yeah.
Why, like, don't, if your intention is to be hurtful, even if you're like, but it's for the sake of comedy, it goes back to the whole bullying thing of like, can't take a joke. It's like, well,
Yeah.
no, the intention is for you to be hurtful.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, and it kind of feels like a lot of times we could have played this clip, again, this is why I'm like, everything's a quote for me. There's a Simpsons episode where Marge takes Bart school shopping and she gives him, in his eyes, some kind of nerdy clothes. And he's like, Mom, kids are going to beat me up if they see me in this. She goes, well, if they beat you up, they're not really friends. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I know. It's not my friends who are beating me up.
Right. It's like, yeah,
And
you're right, Mom.
and like, hopefully most people realize like, oh, that's not actually a friend, but sometimes it's just not the friends. Like, it's somebody who doesn't
Yeah.
like you at work or
But sometimes it is the friends.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is the friends. And that's when it gets real tricky. That's when it's like, man, this person does respect me. And like, I really admire them. And I want to, like, I enjoy spending time with them. But
yeah.
God, they're degrading me. And they're like,
Yeah.
but it's all for the humor. And, I think that's where it's like, you got to use your voice and you got to
Yeah.
say, like, hey, I didn't find this funny.
Yeah. I'm going to put you in a spot. I want you
All
to
right.
tell me if you agree with this statement or disagree with this statement.
Okay.
It takes courage to stand up to your enemies. It takes even more courage to stand up to your friends.
Oh, 100%. That is pure accuracy. It is, I would say it's relatively, it is easier to stand up to your enemies. To the people who aren't important to you, even if we don't call them enemies, people who aren't important to you.
Yeah.
Easiest thing in the world. If they are like, wow, why would you say that? If you stand up and they're like, their hurt feelings mean nothing to you.
Mm-hmm.
In the regards of you're speaking, hey, this is how this made me feel. And if they're like, screw you, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, like that means nothing to me. Like, I've lost nothing. You are not important to me. And the relationship that we have,
Yeah.
or the interactions we have, are nothing. Where sending up to a friend, I mean, that's some Harry Potter shit right there.
Yeah.
Like that's some Neville Longbottom. Just standing up to your friends is one of the hardest things, and literally being like, hey, man, I don't like this.
Yeah.
I don't like the name calling. I don't like,
Yeah.
the way, like, the little comments that you're making. Like, I feel bad about X, Y, and Z. And
Yeah.
to have to say that to someone who you admire and respect,
Mm-hmm.
and that the relationship does matter, scariest thing, because you're, one thing that my therapist will say all the time is doing something where there's consequence, where there can be a consequence, is hard, but it's worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it comes in with those friends, that standing up to them is like, it's hard, but it is worth it, either for strengthening that relationship or recognizing that maybe they weren't a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so much that can be learned from, TV and The Simpsons. I mean,
Yeah.
34 years of content. It's going to teach you something.
Yeah, exactly. So as we wrap it up, I got a kind of a couple speed round questions for you.
Yeah, let's go.
First, which clip did you think was funnier?
Honestly, I thought the one where in the bar
Yeah?
with Mo, with Mo and the boys and Homer and his prank
Yeah.
not going over well. Partially, obviously, it's a longer clip.
Yeah.
On YouTube, it's like a minute and a half versus like 11 seconds.
Yeah.
But I just I love the extra parts at the end with like getting taken down from the what is it, Mount Rushmore.
Yeah.
Or the Hall of Honor, whatever
Yeah.
it is, the Wall of Honor. And then again, Homer's favorite song being is Raining Men. Like those little things, it's like, or Homer being like, it's not even like the pranks that I think are funny, which I laughed hysterically. I'm like, oh, you got me, like getting my alcohol so close. But it's it's like, oh guys, this pub is like a tavern to me. I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
Homer.
there's a lot of cool. I love you had to go and take it too far. Use that. I will say I'm on the other side. The Chief Pigum line gets me every time. Every time. It's not just the Chief Pigum. And now I'm gonna have like a more appreciation for it for what you said. Like, of all the stuff Sideshow Bob's done, that's what he picks out. So that just made it so much funnier. Next question. Which clip did you think you got more out of, or taught? Which clip do you think was more educational, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, you could flip a coin on that one, but I think the slight edge would have to go to the Chief Pigum. There's so many little nuances within it that I think are just like, you can take it in so many different directions. Like we could have done an entire episode and talking about completely different things within that same clip.
All right, this is getting funny because now actually I would say the other one. I felt like that one had more teaching because it just went longer. Because my thought was like, you could break down I think you brought a lot to this. Like you talked about there being a theme to the humor.
Yeah.
And Homer missed that theme. And yeah, I think there's a lot to that.
Absolutely. I mean, like, again, it was literally a coin toss of like both are so educational. And so good.
And then last question, if you had to break down in a clip more, which one would you prefer?
I mean, at that point, like if it's really just based on length, it's got to be Most Tavern. It's got to be the pranks. Just because there is more content to go over. There is more of that you can really pull from and get some ideas from.
Yeah,
and lessons, I guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if we had to do a breakdown, I'd go with that one too. Well, beautiful. Thank you for being on here, Jacob.
Absolutely. Truly, it was a pleasure. I'm still waiting for my donut. But I'm happy to keep on waiting. Maybe it's just mails have to come back on.
I'll mail it. If people are interested, can they reach out to you?
Yeah. I'm most active on Instagram. You can find me at JR Shore Lunch. That's SCHOR Lunch. And that's really where I'm most active, is on Instagram. So check me out there. It's just kind of my personal diary of the things that I'm like, this is fun this week.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Jacob's got a lot of character. You'll love it. What you saw today is what you get with Jacob. So really pleasure to have. I'm so happy you were the first guest, honestly.
Oh, I'm very honored.
Yeah.
Truthfully, so honored to have been the first guest, and I'm excited to see where this adventure goes.
Yeah, I mean, the 13 other people I asked were busy, but in the end,
I'm not. I don't know. I didn't hear any of that.
For me, guys, I have another podcast. It's called Two Voices, One Story. It's very different from this podcast. It chronicles like my mental health in season 1. Season 2, which we're on right now, is talking about our son who had a lot of medical issues at birth. But if mental health is something you're interested in, or just want to hear somebody's experience to know you're not alone, go check that out. Again, Two Voices, One Story. We're working on our social media presence. I have no idea how to do it. I'm frickin' 39. I don't get it. I don't know how that stuff works. So I'm still figuring out Google.
Are you still using Ask Jeeves?
Yeah. This might be my end, like after the credits roll.
Yeah.
So funny story, as you know, Jacob, every time we meet on D&D, every time I'm like,
Every time.
let's get on Skype, guys. And they're like, do you mean Zoom? I'm
mean
like,
Zoom?
oh yeah.
I'm like,
That's
shit,
it.
I got to remember my login for Skype. How did we download that?
Yeah, it's just like, I'll say it and everybody's like, what? And I don't know. I don't know
Every
why
time.
Skype
Every
isn't.
time for you.
Skype, if you want to come back, sponsor us.
Yeah, right. Honestly, the number of times that Joe mentioned Skype, you guys be back in business.
We start recording on Skype and it's just like, I can't hear anything. All right. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Okay, hang on. All right. There's a lot of times I almost broke.